just realizing like, oh, we're doing this thing together, and we're in this together, and like we're excited to figure it out together.
That was really refreshing to be in a situation where I didn't feel like I had to pretend like I had all the answers.
There was a sense of like childlike play. Did we all just become best friends?
Hi, friends. Welcome to another Dreams of Education podcast with me, Kelly Tankley, and my friend and co-host,
Michelle Baldwin.
Michelle, today I got the notification that today was supposed to be graduation for us.
Aww.
Of our 8th graders, which made me feel like very sad. And I can't believe it's been a full year without Anastasis and without running a school. And the year has been unexpectedly lovely as a breath to take. And there are pieces that I miss so much. And this week, seeing all of our rituals pop up on our calendar because we thought we'd be open.
Right.
Are really just making it a little bit bittersweet right now that we aren't with our families and that group of kids, and we aren't able to lean into some of our favorite rituals of the year. And last time we talked about storyline and what a special like event that was to just put a bow on the year and really celebrate the learning. But as we were talking, we were really going through the different rituals that we have this time of year. And storyline was one of them, but we always had this graduation time that included a concert for all the kids were kind of involved in this musical component. And we really did that not only because we wanted to share what they were doing with you through music and the different projects that they had done throughout the year, but also with graduation, we wanted that to be a time where the whole community was coming to celebrate whether or not they had an 8th grader graduating, and how important that was to just the shape of what happened the rest of the year. And some of those rituals that we have at the beginning of the year really have a through line to the end of the year. And so how we think about that and connect those. So thought we would kind of go on that journey today, but maybe we start with graduation because today was supposed to be that.
Yeah.
And why don't you talk a little bit about the musical component and kind of how you built through that and then what that looks like as part of our graduation ceremony?
Sure. In previous schools, when I was a music teacher, we'd have concerts throughout the school year to really showcase what the kids were learning. And in Anastasis, we did that also, but not as frequently because it wasn't just about performance. I wanted to include inquiry in music as we were doing in the classrooms too. So it wasn't just learn how to sing this song or how to play this song and then perform it. There was a lot more involved. And one of the things that I liked to share with the families when they would come to any kind of performance was that specific fact that this isn't going to necessarily be a polished performance every single time because we're looking at progress. It can't always, and we said this about in the last podcast and the previous one as well, it can't always be about the end product. You have to be able to celebrate the journey and the learning that's happening as you're going. And so, our kids would play, a lot of different Orff instruments. So that's xylophones, percussion instruments. We had world music drumming features as well as singing. So the kids were able to really kind of throughout the year show all of the different levels of learning. And sometimes I would explain that to the audience and sometimes I wouldn't. But most of the time it was telling them, our kids only get to have music once a week, where in other schools, they'd be in music 2 or 3 times a week, at least in my experience, and how that changed not only how I taught music, but also how they performed. That was a pretty big deal. And there were times like, I'm not using this as an excuse, but I want you to understand these kids have learned a lot. And part of that is because we aren't focusing entirely on an end product or a specific song to perform. It's how are we learning about these instruments and the types of music, whether it was like a song that we'd learned. There was a Kenyan folk song that we learned versus a French song about a windmill. I mean, all of these different things and how the kids learned about different styles of music along the way too.
And you always connected it so well to inquiry. And what I loved about those moments of showing, inviting the audience into the process was not only was that the learning process they were invited into, but because they were doing some of that world drumming,
Mm-hmm.
we were also able to talk about how we listen as community. And you talked a
Mm-hmm.
lot with the kids about like, if you're only focused in on the thing you're doing,
Right.
it's not going to work. We have to be responding to one another and paying attention and picking up cues and all of these. So it was this like also beautiful interplay of how we built community, but it was shared through this process and through the music and through the whole thing. And I love that it was part of the graduation ceremony. It wasn't a separate thing that people came to. Part of that was really intentional because, like I said, we wanted the whole community to come celebrate our graduates. Our graduates always prepared a speech at the end where they were kind of passing on the torch. They were telling about what their experience at Anastasis was like, and then they were passing the torch and kind of to the next group of kids. And so much about what happened in those graduation speeches we learned pretty early were so brilliant and were such a good representation of what happened at Anastasis, and hearing it through the kids' voice that we were like, I actually think if all the parents were present
Mm-hmm.
for this, they would see what we're up to here. Like
Right.
they would get to see that the moments in time add up to this greater sum. Um, and so I think you're the one who said, well, why don't we put the music component as part of graduation and kind of break it up and then invite everybody in, because they're, yes, going to see their child, but they'll also get to see this junior high really, and all that they've done and accomplished, and how articulate they were, and how meaningful that ceremony was, because it was about the kids and the learning, and it was their experience that was being shared rather than the adults kind of deciding how that was all going to look and it being more packaged. And because we had small junior highs, every single student got to give a speech, so it wasn't just one,
Right.
where you think of like, how do we choose one standout? You got to hear from every single student, and you got to see Anastasis and their experience at Anastasis through the lens of every student, which was, I think, so special.
Well, I think the important part here is that it's community, right? So every school that I've ever been to, families come to the ceremonies, to the concerts, whatever, only for the ones that their kids are in, or maybe their relatives. If they, have relatives. I taught at one school that had, it was a really small town, so everybody was related. But when you see somebody get up, my kid's done performing, then they get up and leave. Whoever's at the end of that performance or the end of that ceremony now feels like, well, when you physically see somebody walking out, right, it sends a message that you're not important to me. We have been intentional about helping families see that Anastasis wasn't about just your child. It is a community. Your investment in that community with your time and your attention is way more important than any financial or anything other kind of contribution. And that's very not much. It's just not the norm for other schools. And I'm not saying that that's a bad thing necessarily, but when you see a 5-year-old and that kid's parents staying around for your graduation speech, there's multiple things happening there. It shows that to the graduate, you're important to me, but it also helps that 5-year-old see, oh, my family knows that this is important, right? And the parents now get to see, if you started here and you went all the way through, it's not just the work of one teacher who prepared those kids with the speeches, right? It is, this is the entire community of Anastasis pouring into those children and having an effect on the outcome, which is them graduating and leaving.
And we being you and I rarely got to see those speeches before they were happening, right? Usually they were being crafted in the classroom with that junior high teacher. And what I loved is the number of times they would shout out every single teacher they had at Anastasis. They would shout out their mentorship group kids. They would shout out, their buddies that they walked with every morning, their classmates, all of these things. And to hear that as a parent, but also then to hear your child's name in this junior high, and they're not in the same class, and to hear the impact that they had, and they would often hear about these names at home. And so to then, see that again, that through line where we started at Identity Day, and we request that parents don't just go to your own child's, you go to everybody in the community, get to know everybody's, because that's how we interact internally at Anastasis. And so we wanted to invite the parents into that. And then to end the year with Storyline, where we're asking them to do the same, like, please go see everybody's project, and for them to be able to see how that changes over time and how articulate these kids get, and just that metamorphosis of change, like as the years go on. And then to hear those speeches, to have their kids' names shouted out, to see that, you'd always look over at the younger kids and there'd inevitably be tears, that the bigs are leaving and that they weren't going to be there. And then, family pictures at the end, and who wants to be in the picture, and they want everybody, they wanted everybody to be there. So it was such a nice visual of what makes Anastasis special in these like small ritual moments that didn't feel all that small.
Well, I think we can talk about that throughout this episode, but it has to be intentional from the beginning. We can't just do business as usual or a traditional model and then at the end say, oh, please be there for everybody. It has to go throughout the whole year. You have to start the school year in the way that you also want to end the school year. And I think that's important in how we approached everything that we did, even though it didn't always, like, sometimes we couldn't always see that far ahead because we were so busy in the moment, but it had to be intentional. Otherwise, we wouldn't have gotten there at the end.
Well, and I think that's such an important point to make, because like we talked about in the Storyline episode, these aren't things you can just tack on at the end and hope that they work. Even if you have the best of intentions of like, we want to bring community together, the intentionality hasn't been built, and that hasn't been a lived value all year. You're not going to get people aren't going to understand why you're asking them to do that and show up in that way. And it's not going to be meaningful to anybody at that point if it's not been kind of, like I said, a lived value.
Well, and so, okay, we started the school year off with Identity Day, and we end the school year with Storyline. And how, if we only did those two things and nothing else in between, we're not honoring the identity that we were working through. What's the point of getting to know anything about the kids if you're just going to do Identity Day and then treat them as if they're all cogs in the wheel or data points or however, different ways that we've described these kids before. They're not just students, they are a community of learners. And when we have that set up from the very beginning, that then leads into Storyline at the very end. And all of the community building happened very intentionally all the way through. And that's why it worked.
Through daily rituals, we've talked about metanoia and our walks and mentorship groups and all of these pieces. I think that there are probably more intentional ways that we could have even fostered that throughout the year with parents.
Sure.
And we had tried different things throughout the years, parent universities and different things. But I do know that the events that we had, while they were events to raise money.
Right.
But at their core, they were always community events. So like the money almost became an outcome of what happened at the event, but the way that we planned it was very much community focused and getting people to be there in community and building that. The money was great and it was needed and it was secondary. It was interesting. I was in a nonprofit lunch and learn the other day, and we were talking about like, what can you expect, giving wise, putting on a big event for your organization. And across the board, everyone was like, it's not worth it. It's not worth it. It's not worth it. Like, you're not going to make anything. And I was like, is that true for us? And I was thinking back and it wasn't. But we didn't start with, let's put on an event. We started with, how can we build community? And so we did it through things like Pumpkin Palooza and Franksgiving and these different moments of time where we were gathering, but the gathering was first focused on, how do we be together? How do we help parents connect? How do we get parents across different classes to connect? How do we get teachers to connect? And being as small as we are, that was a little bit easier. But
Right.
when I was thinking back to our events, they were a lot of work, but they were always, always, always worth it because we were starting with community and not trying to let's build the biggest event that we can to make the most money that we can. And then it falls flat because everybody feels obligated to show up. And I
Right.
think that's a different angle.
Well, and I think
And the
we
kids were
can
involved, in all of those
exactly,
events. The
right?
kids were involved in all kinds of ways. So that made a
And
difference
even
too.
when it was a more like an adult themed event like Thanksgiving, there was still
Mm-hmm.
something there for the kids to go to. So like a lot of times people will look at those things and say, I can't do this because I don't have childcare. And we were able to make sure that that was an option at the event also. I think it's pretty easy to talk about how great these things were and to give it like there's this a little bit of an illusion that it was always perfect, which of course it was not.
No, I wouldn't say one of them went
Right.
perfectly ever.
But or even just how difficult sometimes it can be to work and develop community, because that you're talking about groups of people who don't always get along. So we always did the best that we could to
Well, and who have
ensure
busy
that
lives outside of us.
absolutely. Exactly. And their own issues going on with their own lives. I'm having a hard time talking within their own lives. There we go. And so it is a challenge to build community and to sustain community. It's always worth it, even when it doesn't work great, even because there have been some school years where we've just had folks who didn't get along as well as other years.
Mm-hmm.
And when we say that, that again just comes with that caveat of it doesn't mean you stop. Like you
Yeah.
don't just stop trying because, well, they don't get along, so it's not going to work. You always try to keep building that. Just again, it benefits the kids. It really helps families to see that they're not alone in
Mm-hmm.
whatever they're going through. And for some people, that is a much harder. It's a lot harder to be vulnerable with being in community is in itself a vulnerable act,
Yes.
right?
And we are not good at it in this country. We
No,
just aren't.
right.
And we've talked about like churches aren't particularly great at it. Like we just aren't great at really cultivating community intentionally, and we don't explicitly teach it. We assume that it'll just come. And sometimes that's true, but unfortunately, usually it takes like a tragedy or something like big
Right.
to bring us together
Yeah.
and do it well. And so we wanted to say like, well, what would happen if we were really intentional with the kids and with the families and with staff to build a healthy community so that kids know what a healthy community looks like,
Right.
which, that's the people I want engaging civically and doing things like those are the people I want in this world are people who know how to be in community in healthy ways, how to resolve conflict when there is conflict, how to navigate, busy seasons or whatever it might look like. And I just don't think that we do it super well as a
I
general
think
rule.
no. And I think that, especially since we have the luxury of talking to people outside of the United States all the time, there's this sense in the US that we have to do everything ourselves and be super competent all the time. This rugged
Well, we definitely have,
individualism,
I was going to say cowboy
right?
syndrome for sure.
And unfortunately, it's such a big lie. You aren't supposed to do it by yourself. You're supposed to be in community. There's a reason there's a saying that it takes a village, right? That is important because you cannot do it all on your own, no matter how much you think you can. It's why we have a lot of stress and other health issues in our country that you don't
and
always
feelings
see
of
in
isolation
others.
and
Yes.
loneliness.
Yes. Yeah.
I saw a report the other day that the number one use of AI recently is companionship. And I was like, excuse me, what? Hold the phone. That just tells you how lonely and isolated people are, that they're seeking out companionship from an inanimate something that can't give you that.
I will also say this because I do feel that there's some of that, but I also feel that there are people who I posted this the other day online. I was talking with an author and she was kind of going off on, these people who want AI to do everything for them and be everything for them. And I said, well, it's really because they want a best friend, but they don't want to have to be a friend themselves. And that's when you go back into community. It is give and take for sure. And it doesn't have to be 50-50 because sometimes you need more than you can give and vice versa.
There's times when the imbalance is enormous.
Yes.
I mean, just like in marriage, just like in friendship,
absolutely,
just
yes.
like in all the
in
places.
the classroom, in work, all of those kind of things. So when I look at that loneliness epidemic, part of it is that we have a hard time not only saying I need this because I'm vulnerable, but I also think that we have a hard time saying, hey, I'm in a good place right now. How can I help you? And that's what people in a good community do for each other.
It's so pervasive, though, this myth in America that we can do it all ourselves.
Right.
That just as you were saying, we have had to also teach families how to do this well. And honestly, ourselves. Like, I learned how to be in community by starting Anastasis.
Same.
With that intention. Because, I'm being the introvert I'm actually just perfectly fine doing things on my own for the most part and having one person. I don't feel the need to I'm not the social butterfly who always wants to be around people. That just isn't my personality. And I realize that a lot of how I even view what community is comes from a very unhelpful narrative that is that American exceptionalism, just do it yourself and pull up your bootstraps and go at it alone. It really was when you start a school, you actually can't do that. It's not going to work well. And so we learned pretty early on, but it was an explicit thing that we named early, was we wanted kids to learn how to be in community well. Even though I would say we didn't always know exactly what that looked like, it was intentional from the get-go.
I know that I have a hard time asking for help when I need it. Part of that is the little perfectionist in me that is, nope, I can do this all by myself. And then also not wanting to be seen as weak or needy or whatever.
Yes.
And then
or
how
too much a burden for somebody.
Exactly.
Right?
That is for sure it, because I never want to be a burden on somebody else. And I know how many times I've had to really step that back and say, gosh, I need a lot of help right now because I can't do it. And all I'm doing is making myself stressed out and everybody around me also stressed out. In watching students try to do things and then get super frustrated, I could see, guys, you don't have to keep trying to do this by yourselves. You can ask a neighbor for help. You can ask me for help.
People.
So again, learning oh, I got to really model this.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, and I hated this so much in the moment, but I loved what it created.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't have a sub list. We didn't have a sub pool that you could just call and somebody fill in for you. And so a lot of times when something came up and it was shoot, I've got to go, I have an appointment. There's no other time of the day I can make it. It's right smack in the middle. And what would happen? You'd have 3 other teachers or me come in and say, well, they can join my class and we're doing this great thing. And because everybody's working on the same inquiry block, we can kind of figure this out. Or why don't we do a read-in with the bigs and the littles, and they can we'll make it an intentional time of connection. Those moments where as educators, we had to rely on each other in different ways is so different than any other school I've been in, where it would be, I'm just going to knock myself out to find a sub and write sub plans and do all the things. This was people coming in and saying, well, I've got something next week, so if you cover me this week, I can help you. It was just this beautiful reciprocal thing that I don't know would have happened if we didn't have the constraints we had.
It also forced us to be agile and flexible with what we were doing within the classroom so that we could make space for that. And it wasn't, I feel like in previous models of schools where I had to have sub plans, I could write the best sub plans ever. It doesn't mean that that sub was going to be able to do exactly what I'd planned. And even if they did, I wasn't there to see what the kids were doing. So you don't really have.
We phone it in and put
yes.
in a VHS.
Or we give them something that is enrichment and still important, but as the teacher, I'm not there to observe and see what's happening. So you look at that as, well, that's a waste of a day. Truly, if we're doing the things that we know we need to be doing for kids, flexibility and agility are really important life skills. And understanding that it's going to look different today, and here's what that might be, and you're going to go
They
learn with
saw
some other
us model that
classroom.
so
They
well.
did. And I think
Because
that,
every day we were like, well, and now we're responding to this.
yes. So when you look at it from that point of view, it's not a lost day of learning, which a lot of schools will say that any sub day is like that, which again, there's the pressure on the teachers to never get sick and to always be at school, because otherwise your kids are going to have a learning loss. And that's just ridiculous. So I loved how we were able to do that. And whether you came in and subbed for the whole day, or Mickey or whoever, or they joined another class, the learning looked different that day, but it was still learning. Things were happening and it was valuable.
And it was still rich, valuable learning. Like it wasn't what I had growing up, which was truly like we leave the sub of VHS to like put in and push play.
Or a packet of worksheets or something, right?
Or a packet of worksheets. Yeah. Dang. Yeah, exactly. So I know we started with the ritual of graduation. One of the things that we did after that graduation, there was always a video as part of graduation that was like the junior high experience of the year, and then a special section of just the 8th grade graduates. And that was always fun I enjoyed the videos, but more than the videos, I enjoyed watching the kids respond and react to the videos was the most fun. And not just the junior high, but because our junior high interacted with all of the kids in community all of the time, it was a whole school reaction that would happen. And so that was always fun, and everybody was in on the inside jokes, and everybody, like, it just was a different feel than, you're watching a bunch of kids graduate that you're disconnected from because you don't have touch points like they have at Anastasis. And then following graduation, we always did this great graduation lunch with the whole junior high, where we would go completely all out and like decorate to the nines our lobby and do a special lunch that the parents helped put on. And it was a pretty low lift, honestly. Like it could happen in any school. But again, the intentionality behind it. And then we'd always, I think I talked about the happy jars that we made the kids when they were out at their last excursion of the year, and everybody would write them notes. And when they received those happy jars at the end of graduation lunch, it was like this, like they wanted to immediately like read what everybody had written to them.
So let's specify exactly. It was truly a jar, and
it was truly a glass jar,
right?
And
slips full of notes from everybody in the community.
Every single person, every teacher, every staff member, and every student wrote a note to every graduate. And they were specific because we all knew them. And so they were memories, and they were inside jokes, and they were, things we appreciate, or, some kids would do a Bible verse or something more generic. The littles always drew the sweetest pictures and would write their name and "I love you" on it, "I'll miss you." They took such care. We would dedicate several metanoias the whole week they were gone to, writing to a different set of students each day, so that they didn't get tired and phone it in for the last, whoever was last in the list that day. And the last weeks of school, we would bring kids up in metanoia and say to them what we appreciated about them. So that was part of that. Like, we knew we only had so many days left as this community looks this year. It's going to look different next year. We're going to lose some of these kids. They'll always be a part of Team Anastasis, but we're going to lose some of them. And so we were really like, let's, put a pin in this moment and appreciate who's in this room right now and say it out loud, and not just feel the loss when they're gone, but like, let's appreciate that they're here today and make sure that we get to enjoy this community as it looks this year right now. And so that graduation lunch was always a lot of fun. And again, the memory sharing and the just, I don't know, time for them to be together one last time is just the junior high having lunch together. And I didn't mention this, but at our graduation, we would have teachers who no longer taught with us, retired or moved on, whatever it was, had babies, and they would come and show up at the graduation of the kids who they taught. So even though they were no longer there, you could count on them being in the audience. And often
Right.
we would have alumni come back
Mm-hmm.
for somebody in their mentorship group who was graduating that year, to see not only our current staff, families, and students there, but to also see that the ripples that they had on the teacher, their previous teachers who are no longer with us, the ripples they had on other students who would come back and celebrate with them was always tear jerking and inducing immediately. But I think that's testament to like what happens when you intentionally build this kind of a community.
Right. And we always admit that it would be much more difficult to do had our school been bigger.
Absolutely.
But I think that again, we can look back to say when you create places that are um, unmanageably big, you lose a lot. And again, it comes back down to funding. So I can look back at other, school systems that I've been a part of, and, there have been 450 kids in a school. So
Right.
each grade level might be a community, but it's harder to do that across the board. So why is it that private schools are always small and they can guarantee a 10 to 1 or 12 to 1 or 15 to 1 ratio? But when it comes to our public schools, are not willing. I mean, because again, the money can be there, but we're not willing to fund our public schools in a way that allows them to do what we were able to do at Anastasis.
We're not willing to be permissive
Hmm.
with what can happen in those spaces, which is the real problem. Like if every school leader had a complete autonomy over their budget and over how things go in their school, I think even in a public school, it looks very different.
Absolutely good.
I
Yep.
think the trouble is when you don't have that autonomy,
Hmm.
then yeah, it gets really hard to do things like this. It doesn't mean that you can't still be really intentional about how community is built. I think about schools my first elementary school was incredible. It was a school that I just barely lived on the edge of getting into this one instead of the other. I don't know how they would characterize themselves, and I don't think they still characterize themselves the way they did when I was there, but we had daily walks when I was in the third grade. Like it was a pilot that they were putting on, and they did a whole school post office, inter school post office. And so every school, or every classroom rather, had a name that was one somehow tied to Colorado. So it was either, an animal or a mountain or peak or whatever. And there were just enough touchstones that even though not through the grades we didn't interact all that much, we still felt all very much a part of something. And the way that the community was cultivated, to your point, at the grade level with the 3 different or 4 different classes was very intentional. And they allowed us to send notes from one class to another, and we had buddies, and we had, there was one grade level that was in charge of the post office and delivering mail. And so we knew all those kids, when they showed up at the door to put it in our mailboxes. There were things that they were doing that were very much clearly intended to build community. And it wasn't perfect by any, like, there are still room to grow there, but it was so much better than what I had in other schools. So I just want to encourage people that just because you may not be able to do it exactly like we did, that it doesn't
Right.
mean that there aren't micro moves that can be made that would make a big difference.
And again, it comes back down to being intentional, looking at the constraints that you have and deciding, okay, I can't do all of the things, but if there's one thing that I can do, it's going to focus on relationships and that sense of community, because kids need that to feel like they belong. I know that I have read some really unfortunate education discourse in the last couple of months. So I'm trying not to be a Debbie Downer here. But when you look at, well, that's just a warm, fuzzy thing. That's not academic at all. I'm like, if you want to reach a kid's brain, you have to care about that kid in some, and you have to show them that you care enough about their brains.
Understand the warm fuzzy, like, I don't understand that stance at all, because we have all the research showing that belonging, relationship, community, how important that is to the learning. Like, this is not new research. This is known, and we keep doing it, and it keeps pointing to the same things. And yet
same things. Yep.
We stop hyper focused on academics and getting kids to pass tests and making sure that they're, at grade level, performing at grade level. And we miss the things that are actually going to create the conditions, the enabling conditions that allow for that to happen. And it's like, I don't understand how we keep missing this. And it's part of it, sarcasm of, that soft stuff. And you're like, get over yourself.
I think
people.
Part of it is that we have some people who are in charge or making laws or whatever, wherever you want to go, whichever point that you want to direct your ire toward. But it's people who truly don't know, and maybe just like, do you have any friends? I mean, I'm not trying to be snarky. Like, seriously, do you have any true friends? Because these people would be the ones to call you out and say, listen, you sound really uncaring there. And not everybody has to suffer through all the things. And in fact, I think that if we choose to alleviate some suffering for people, we can make the world better for everyone, right?
Wouldn't that be incredible?
I know. I mean, I digress, but it's all connected. And when we show kids that we care enough, and we want them to be excited about learning, and that there can be places for them where they are known well enough that they can take risks in their learning. They can come out and say, hey, I don't understand this, and not worry about, being made fun of. Or school is not a wonderful place for a lot of kids.
School felt like the Hunger Games to me most
Pretty much.
days. Like, it felt like, heaven forbid somebody see you mess up, because you're going to get eaten. Like, you're going to get killed and eaten. It just felt very like every man for themselves, Lord of the Flies. Like, it did not feel most of my school career like a place where it was okay to be myself, where it was okay to make a mistake, where it was okay to look silly,
And yet we have people who write articles about kids this is a very high anxiety generation of kids, and they're blaming social media entirely. And I'm like, maybe it's not just social media. Maybe it's all of the things that don't give kids a safe place to learn and to be themselves and to grow in a way that is beneficial for them. So instead of pointing at all of these external things here, I would say our kids need community more now than ever.
Well, and when I think about like who created social media, it's people our age,
right,
who created these platforms. And I'm like, what were they doing? Well, they were creating, like, our whole life has been built around show the Stepford version, the perfect version. That's what we experienced in schools. It was like, have your stuff together, make sure you're on trend, don't make a stupid mistake in front of people, don't make the mean girls mad because they're going to be all. There were so many unspoken, wildly unhealthy messages that we got in schools, and then we just put them on platforms
and made
platforms
them, made it so that everybody can see. And I'm not going to take we're both anxious people. We have, and then I look back at the ways that we were raised in schools, and I'm like, how could it have been any different? I don't know how anybody gets through that without scars. I think it's hard because, again, humans were not meant to see their own faces as much as we see our own. Like, even just you and I doing this podcast where we have a video format, and I just try not to look at myself. I just look at you the whole time.
I look at you.
But again, we were not in, I don't think there's anything within our psyche or even in our brains that prepared us to see ourselves this much. and also to then have this version of ourselves that is online. And personally, I'm not going to take the word of a man who started social media by, rating women, whether they were hot or not, to say that this is an important piece, right?
Again.
And in fact, I'm going to go back and say,
I wonder why we have anxiety.
Right. I'm going to go back and say we need to counter that by allowing students to be in a place where they can be themselves. They feel good about the things that they are good at. I mean, heaven forbid, right? But that they feel good about those things, that they learn that we don't look at them as deficits. Oh, yeah, you're really strong in reading, but you suck at math. That's not how I look at kids. I'm like, oh, you're that kid who loves snakes. I love snakes too. Hey, that's really cool. By the way, we're going to really...
I know exactly who you're talking about. Because that's how well we know those kids.
I also can now, because I have that touch point there, I am now able to work with these kids and say, I see you as something other than just my math student or my general classroom student, right? There's something else there. And because of that, that kid will know I don't just care about a math test. I really am interested in more about that person in front of me than just the data point that shows up on some test. And when we look at community throughout the whole school year, that's where we start with Identity Day, and that's how we end with Storyline, and that is intentional.
I was writing today about our rituals of the morning walk and how much we learned about kids just purely being on that morning walk, because we're connecting with them outside. We're at school, but we're not doing school things, right? So we're connecting in this sneaky third place where we're able to just listen, just connect person to person and listen to their stories. And they tell us about, things going on in their families or a play they're in or something they're really excited about or the book they're reading. Or I often heard about Harry Potter on those, what part in a series that they were in, or they would just be playful and ask random questions that you're like, where'd that come from? And I loved that time of so easy. Literally any school could do that.
Right.
And it just gave you a human to human connection instead of a teacher to student connection. It just felt different the way that we interacted. And it changed how then we interacted in the classroom, because now we do know that you have this passion for snakes and that so does Mrs. Baldwin. And so when you talk about them and they give me the heebie-jeebies, do I have someone you can talk to about this. But it's that human connection that I think we take for granted, that it'll just be built because we're all in the same space. And it's like, well, that's not really how it works. It is all of those moments that really make a difference.
And the more you sanitize the classroom away from that, the less you get out of the kids. And it reminded me too about even how we approached field day differently than any other field day that I've ever done before.
Yeah. Yeah. Let me get through our graduation day, because there's two other pieces that I want to talk about, and then we'll talk about field day, which happened after graduation. But I was thinking about even how we did yearbook signings, and we made the yearbook part of everybody gets one. We made it just part of our activity fee so that there was never anybody that was without one. We learned that over the years, because sometimes parents would buy one for the siblings, everybody share, and
like a family yearbook. Yeah.
A family yearbook, and it got tricky. So we started just putting it into the activity fee so everyone got one. But we would gather in in our campfire room, which was a large room, and we'd put on music, and the kids would spend the afternoon just signing each other's yearbooks, and we would end with a whole school dance party. And the dance parties happened every Friday at 3:10 time, but they also happened just, spontaneously throughout the year. And what I loved, I wouldn't have been caught dead in school joining in a dance party because I dance like Elaine on Seinfeld. But I love that all of the teachers get in on the dance party with the kids, and the littles are always in for it. And then, as kids get older, they tend to not be so quick to jump in. That became less and less true every year at Anastasis, because you had the OGs who were growing up, and they were not afraid to look ridiculous and silly, and they'd join a conga line, and the teachers would get in and I would do something ridiculous and we'd get the kids dancing with. So it was just, again, such a different experience than maybe I would have had in that same kind of a moment in my schooling. But it was because of the way that that happened throughout the year, and we had built safety in the community that it's okay to look silly and it's okay to not,
Right.
have all the right dance moves or whatever. And so the kids kept participating and kept, like, it was fun for everybody. It wasn't just fun for those who, took dance and wanted to show off their cool moves, which I so
And
appreciate. And we let them in on the, like, making the
sure.
playlist and what song are
Yep.
we playing next, and everybody singing Sweet Caroline together. Like,
Again, there were some kids who were like, I don't dance. I don't dance. I don't dance. Cool. And they would just like kind of hang out on the perimeter of the room and
they'd still
bop their
get in
head or
on that
whatever.
conga
Yeah,
line,
right.
though.
Oh yes.
Let's be
And
real.
but there was space for that too. It wasn't required. No, you all have to dance. No, it was, do what you want to do. Be you. Be you.
Yep. And I love that. So then the next day after graduation and storyline, that all happened on one day, we met up at a local park and we would have our field day. But as you mentioned, our field day was not like most field days. And some of that is my own field day trauma, that I was like, I hated field day growing up because I do not have an athletic bone in my body and I am not particularly coordinated. And so it was a day where I felt very highlighted as an idiot. Like, I always felt like, don't make me do this. This isn't, I know who's going to get the ribbon, and it's the one who plays on, the soccer team, or the one who play, whatever it
Right.
is. It's not going to be me. And I'm just going to feel like an idiot all day and less than. Like, it just was an opportunity
Yeah.
to feel invisible and left out.
I know that we have talked about competition in previous episodes and how a lot of people see competition as extremely healthy. And I'm like, when you are competing against yourself, it's healthy. When you're always competing against someone else, it can lean towards being unhealthy. And here's why. It's not that we want to teach kids that they're always going to be winners. That's not it at all.
No.
But as you just said, when it's already a foregone conclusion of who's going to win the 50-yard dash, or sorry, that's all Mrs. Baldwin, still back in the day of when we competed in yards. So
We did that 50-yard dash. Did that change?
Right. Oh yeah, it's all meters now, which yay.
Oh,
So
okay.
we're actually doing things in the metric system. Huzzah.
I didn't know.
But field day often brings out the kids who are going to win no matter what, because they're very athletic. And then it's supposed to be in the spirit, again, of community. But when you create activities that only reward those kids who are very gifted athletically, then everyone else is like you said, you hated that day. I felt, depending on what school year it was for me, I either loved or I hated it, because for a long time I was very athletic and very, very fast. So I was the one who was always winning. I thought it was great. And then as I got a little older, people caught up.
Another caveat, I've had rheumatoid arthritis since I was 9.
I was just going to
not
say,
only
yes.
was it not fun for me, like, it physically felt terrible. Like, it hurt my body and I would push because I didn't want to be embarrassed.
Mm-hmm. I was going to say it very much.
It was a day where I felt embarrassed all day long.
And it leaves a lot of kids out. There's a lot of discussion amongst disabled communities about how not every disability is a visible disability. We have a lot of kids now that we know who have POTS.
Yep.
Dysautonomia. We know that they are not able to compete in things that way, but they don't look like they have a disability. We're going to see more and more of these kind of kids where they have something that's invisible or they don't. And now we're looking at field day, if it's only a physical competition at all points, or you divide it, heaven forbid, in a way that really singles kids out, you're not doing anything to foster community. So how can you change that?
Who were like, it shouldn't be a participation ribbon for everyone. Like, things are competitive in life. And like, the difference though with field day is you're asking everybody to participate. I'm not choosing to compete in that. I'm being forced to compete in that.
Right.
That's not the same as
Exactly.
I want to join the hockey team and be like work so hard to be the best at my craft. Like that's not what this is. That is me choosing to be a part of that team and to be a part of whatever and to really put my all into being the best. That's not what field day is. Field day is everybody is participating and you're competing whether or not you want to.
And that's not a great way
And I hated
to foster community. It's not inclusive. So when you look at what kind of activities are going to be beneficial for all of the kids that we have, you can have some activities that we did a lot of relays where some parts of the relays might have been running as far as you could, but another part of the relay might have been putting on a silly hat and glasses and a shirt or something. We looked at the kids that we had. We said, okay, these are some really fun kids. What are they going to enjoy doing? We had a lot of different types of activities the entire day that gave them some physical expression as well as just silliness.
Well, just having fun.
Yes.
Together. Because when we approached field day, we didn't look at it as what competitions are we going to put in place. So like we'd never looked at it in that terms. We looked at how are we going to be playfully together as a community one last time this year? And so everything we chose was more like, how do we just have fun being outside and celebrating the year we had? Every class had team cheers that they worked on leading up, and they would pick a team color and do the team cheer, and everybody would, hear their cheers, celebrate with them. But the only thing they got was for winning the team cheer. It was like we'd just clap for them and vote on whose we liked the best that year. But the only thing they got was first dibs on, there's a stream at the park where we were, dropping in a duck into the stream.
A rubber duck.
For our duck race, right? A rubber duck. And so we did things like relay races that led to every single kid in the creek putting their ducks in and like cheering on their rubber ducks, who's gonna cross the line first. We did things that were, personal, like they were just personally trying to do something like throw frisbees through hula hoops, or that, it wasn't a competition. It was just, we're having fun. We would do like the rock, paper, scissors entourage, where they hop through the hula hoops doing rock, paper, scissors and then run. And they switch teams constantly because, they get adopted to a different team. And so there were all these like just really fun moments. And like you said, we chose what we were doing based on the group of kids we knew we had. Right. So it wasn't like we did the same thing every year, with the exception of the duck race became an every year thing. But one year we did like a huge obstacle course relay. It was just an obstacle course, right? It wasn't even a relay race. And at the end, I was like, oh, wouldn't it be fun if we threw the colored powder at them and like had that be the finish line for everybody. And so everybody's got, and they're white and they've got the colors. We had a year where we filled squirt bottles with paint guns. And as they went through the obstacle course, the challenge wasn't who gets through first, but how can you duck the teachers so you have the least amount of teacher color. We all had different colors that we were spraying them with. And so it was like those kind of things where it's just purely playful, like mischievous fun and play, and we're doing it all together.
And the kids enjoyed it. Like there was a lot of laughing and smiling and jumping around. They had enough free time that they could kind of go sit in the little play area if they wanted to take a rest, or they could swing or whatever. And it was
downside under a shady tree, or downtime under a shady tree. Yeah.
There were times where the classes were able to have class time. Each classroom had time together. And then also it was mixed up in the whole school.
Yep.
Again, it was just a time that we've said intentional a lot, but I think that's the point, right?
Yeah.
Intentional time with community, and families came. We had, my favorite was always around the food, because that's the motivation for me.
Toro the Tot, man. So good.
So we would
they still existed.
We'd have a food truck come, and one of those food trucks was El Toro the Tot that, like Kelly just said, is no longer around. knowing that they'd have time at the end before they left, because it was only a half day.
Mm-hmm.
We'd have all of our field day activities in the morning, and then we would have each class would have their time to go up to the food truck. It was a pre-order, so it wasn't like it was going to take forever.
Yeah.
And then we all sat and kind of ate together in the grass or in the picnic
Well, and
areas.
families came,
Yeah.
parents came. So everybody ordered from the food truck. Some years, if we had a bank of money kind of in reserve for our community activities, we would use that. And so it was free for families to come and eat, and we just paid for it. There were years that we didn't have that in the budget. And so we'd have, we might pay for the kids and have parents pay for theirs. It looked different depending on the year and what our resources look like and what
Right.
fundraising looked like. All those pieces played into it. But we had the food truck every year, and the kids looked forward to the food truck and looked forward to it. Was just, I don't know, it was so fun to have, not just a picnic lunch, but to actually have everybody's having the same lunch. It was almost like going to a restaurant together, but we're doing it in a park.
And we were supporting a local business. I mean, there are so many layers
there were
of
so
this.
many things. Yeah. And yeah, El Toro, those tots, they made the best burgers and tots. They're so good. And yeah, I think they went out of business in COVID, which was such a bummer. And then we tried a lot of different things and tried different trucks each year. But El Toro the Tot has a special place in my heart and in field day. Different from, I think, a lot of schools because of the way we built community. Field day was full of tears at the end as families would like finish up lunch and start heading out, and you would just have like kids clinging to each other, crying. And sometimes because it was a graduate, they weren't going to have, it wasn't going to be part of this community again next year. Sometimes it was just, they really do love coming to school because it's a place where they feel like they belong. And so, on weekends, even we would hear kids say like, I hate that it's Friday. We're internally cheering that we have a day off. And they're like, I hate that it's a 3-day weekend. And you're like, why? Because I like being at school, because I'm not going to see my friends for three days, because I'm not going to feel like I'm part of something for a minute. And I think we forget how transitions impact us no matter what. We would see a ton of dysregulation in our community the last, I would say, 3 weeks of school. And we'd have to remind parents, like, this is part of it. Like, we're feeling dysregulated, whether or not we're like naming it. We would see it in ourselves, like my ability to be agile and to roll with things not going the way that we were expecting them to go got much less flexible.
Right.
As the end of the year came. And I really think it was just my own feelings of dysregulation that a change is about to happen, right? Even good changes. I looked forward to the summer. I looked forward to these events, but it was knowing that my routine was going to be different. And you and I just talked about that even today. Like, I was telling you how I don't know why, but I feel dysregulated in my body. And you're like, well, yeah, because look at how many years this time of year led to that anyway. And it was like, oh yeah, that's pretty true. And I think parents forget that their kids are going to be a little out of sorts because we're headed to, and even change they're anticipating and excited for is still change. And that transition is hard.
I think for humans, I sound like an alien, but I'm including myself in this, of course. We forget that there are seasons, and not just the 4 seasons, but there are seasons within our lives. And whether that's, a routine and a schedule, those change. And sometimes as adults, we don't necessarily recognize them because this is what happens. This is what we do. And for some adults who transition well, that means that they know to anticipate it. They know I'm going to be a little bit different right now. I might need extra sleep, whatever those transitions might look like. For kids, especially if they haven't experienced one yet, so your younger kids or your older kids who are going into a new type of routine and schedule,
and that they don't know what next year looks like exactly, because this has been my...
Yes. Even I don't know what summer's going to look like because I haven't experienced it the way I'm going to this year. All of those things, every kid struggles with the unexpected. I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing.
I think every human, right? That's
I
the
think
thing
so
we try
too.
to inoculate ourselves against is
Adults
not
tend
knowing.
to either pretend or they structure their lives in a way such that they have created their own routine. Kids struggle with that because they don't always know how to create their own routine, especially if those kids are hyper scheduled anyway. So
Mm-hmm.
if you have a school year and you have a hyper scheduled kid who goes to school at a certain time, has an activity after school, et cetera, how that looks for summer is going to be very different. And they know it, but they can't always name it. And
Yeah.
what's hard for the adults then is to remember, oh yeah, they don't know what to expect. I need to help them through this.
Yeah.
Maybe, talk with them about that because it can be really
We
scary.
got much better at that over the years because we would see that pattern play
Yeah.
out where you'd approach either a holiday that we knew we were going to have an extended break, or summer was a huge one, and we would see the kids completely out of sorts, and it's like, what is happening? Like, they've
Right.
had a great year. What is happening right now? And so once we started seeing that and being aware of it, and then reflecting and being like, oh yes, we also have this issue, we got better at helping them name it and pointing it out,
Right.
so that when they were in those moments of like, I don't know why I'm sad, I'm just sad, and it's like, I wonder, because we're headed into something, if you might be a little sad that you're not going to see your friends like you do every day right now. And it's like, oh yeah, that probably is contributing,
Right.
We would hear kids say, I'm really excited because I get to go to Disney with my family, but I also feel sad and I don't really get it. And I'm a little bit nervous and I don't really get it. And it's like, yeah, because things are going to look different. And so we grieve when things, come to an end, when there's endings, we grieve. And so helping the kids name that, see it, talk explicitly about that. Again, that's why that metanoia time was so beautiful, because we had the time built into the day to do that. And then on the walks, as kids are telling us these stories and reflecting and thinking about it, we can then push into that a little bit. And we also got better at helping remind parents that this might be a time of dysregulation. So if
Right.
your kids are extra weepy this week, or if they're short tempered, or if they don't have the same flexibility that they normally have, like, here's things we know about transitions and endings and beginnings that are good to remember, so that you're not taking it personally when your teenager is freaking out, or
Yeah.
talking back, or whatever it might look like.
One of my favorite things that we did at Anastasis throughout the year is that has to do with social emotional learning, was to help kids to name the feelings that they were going through. And here's why that to me is so important. I am a person who gets dysregulated very, very easily. Again, I'm in my mid 50s. It has taken me a really long time to figure that out, to name it, to sense it when it's starting, rather than once I'm already, well into it and have a harder time getting out of it.
Yep.
Now, if I feel myself getting dysregulated, I can stop and do some things to calm me or whatever. But it took me a really long time to recognize that's what it was with kids. And again, I wish I had known all of this when I was, when my own children were younger, because not only could I have helped regulate myself, but then I could also help them learn how to be regulated rather than just expecting them to know what to do. And I think that's one of the hardest things about working with kids is, for many of us, we were just taught, well, that's just a bratty kid, or they're just throwing a tantrum because they're misbehaving.
Or even for ourselves, suck it up. Everybody has
Right.
to do this.
Exactly.
Like, push it down, force it down. And I think if it's mentionable, it's manageable.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like, if we can talk about it, then
Right.
it feels manageable. And that was true. Even, we've said this before, but that is something I appreciated about the staff, is I could show up and be like, I am out of sorts today.
Mm-hmm.
Just letting you all know.
Right.
I'm not going to respond like I normally respond, because
And
I'm
being
feeling
able to,
anxious, or I'm feeling stressed out,
exactly,
or I'm feeling completely underwater. And it made it manageable because I wasn't trying to fake my way through it.
and getting more and more dysregulated as you go, right? When you're able to help a child recognize what's happening in their body, even if they don't know why, so they can talk about it, then we can say, okay, what are some things what are some of our strategies? What are some of our tools that we've learned when we're feeling like this? Because when you can get them back into that zone of regulation, then you can address the issue. And even if they don't know what that is. So as we were talking about at the end of the school year, that's when we saw a lot of different types of behavior and some anxiety and some
And it looked
acting
different for
out.
every
Exactly.
kid.
But because we knew those kids well enough, we could sit with them individually or have them go to another staff member and talk it through. And then it wasn't such a big thing to deal with anymore. It was, this is normal. It's okay to feel like this. Because when you feel all types of dysregulated in your body, it might be in your stomach, or you might have a headache, or I have a tummy ache. I can't come to school today. Any of those things, when you can talk through it and someone tells you it's normal to feel that way,
Mm-hmm.
it's not this big scary monster that you want to either avoid or afraid to deal with. Now you know you have somebody there with you alongside you to help you through it.
Mm-hmm.
And as we were able to help kids see that at the end of the school year, this is a transition. Transitions can be hard for a lot of people. And you and I and a lot of the other staff members would say they're hard for us too.
We would all name our own.
Mm-hmm.
This is what overwhelmed looks like for me. And
Right.
I'm overwhelmed because I'm headed into something unknown. And
Yes.
that can make me feel overwhelmed. And when I'm overwhelmed, I have less tolerance for noise. I have less tolerance for like conflict. I have there's all these things that I have less tolerance for. And it looks like me either shutting down or blowing up, right?
Right.
Getting upset.
Right.
And so, but different staff members had different things where others would be like, yeah, I'm looking forward to it, but I'm also a little sad because I really like this community and how it feels
Mm-hmm.
right now. Right. And so
Right.
when they heard us name our own, then it wasn't even them just guessing, about what that could look like, but they had heard explicitly different ways it could look. And then the kids would join in with their own, like, oh, yeah, my mom said that I'm extra cranky in the mornings this week. And I wonder if, I haven't wanted to get up and I'm extra cranky when she comes in my room and I've been mean and I don't know why I've been mean. And it's like,
Right.
yeah.
Even if they're super excited, right? That I'm so excited for summer. I get to sleep in whenever I want. We heard a lot of kids talk about that.
Yep.
They didn't have to get up early and come to school.
Yep.
They missed school, but they were like, I'm so glad to have an easy schedule. Even that excitement leads to, and I would say, oh, what are some things that you're noticing about yourself? And some of the kids from any age, but surprisingly, the older kids were like, wow, I realized I need a lot more sleep because I'm gearing up towards this. And I was like, yeah, your body needs that. What does that mean for you? And some of them are like, well, I have to put my devices, away earlier,
Mm-hmm.
or I have to go to bed earlier. It's the fact that they were recognizing that in themselves, that is a maturity that we hope we get kids to move toward. And if we only ever tell them what they're doing and what's expected, and expecting them to mind what we tell them to do, they're not learning to age appropriately, of course, but they're not learning to self-regulate either. So the more that we were able to do that, and we keep talking about how this starting point at the beginning of the school year and the through line to the end of the school year. We had to be intentional about all of that work in social emotional learning, understanding how to regulate themselves, so that when they got to the end of the school year, and it was very much an abrupt, in a way, transition for them, quite a few of them could recognize it. They didn't necessarily deal with it perfectly, of course, but they
None of
knew
us
they had
do, but
help.
at least we knew
Exactly.
what was happening.
Yes,
I think
exactly.
about being a kid and not knowing why I was so anxious about things and being embarrassed that I was anxious and everybody else seemed to have it together and like, what's wrong with me, right?
Right.
And so that shame, and then just shove it down, and then I'd get sick to my stomach and all these other things would happen, and nobody in my life was saying, yeah, this is normal. Like, of course you're feeling that way. This is getting ready to happen and you're not sure what to anticipate, or you're excited. And that anticipation can also feel like anxiety. Nobody was saying those kind of things. And I think about schools saying, we want lifelong learners. Well, part of being a lifelong learner is understanding who you are and how you react to the world around you. those folks who want to disparage the soft skills, or like spending too much time on fluffy things. And it's like, to your point, if we all were doing this better, the world would look a lot different. Like, we would be healthier as a society. We would be lifelong learners, even about ourselves and about how we respond and interact to the world. And yeah, I just wish that people could see how important these micro moments are. And again, if it's mentionable, it's manageable. Like, how
Right.
can we get better at that?
And that is coming from two people who were very good at the game of school, saying these things that it's not like,
Well,
I
we were
often,
also very good at about shoving it all down and keep holding it in, which is why we have the other opportunities that we are still untangling as adults.
I do look at this though a little bit as we were both products of expectations of society in how you're supposed to approach school, as well as our own expectations and perfectionism in and of itself. It's not like you and I basically have like a chip on our shoulder about school because we were unsuccessful.
No,
We're looking at
quite
this
the
from
opposite.
exactly looking at we were very successful as students, and we still see here's how the system didn't do well for us because
Yeah.
of that system.
The chip on our shoulder is, we did all the things you told us to be successful and you still screwed us. Yeah.
I wonder, I think you and I had planned to talk a little bit about how we end the school year as staff as
Yeah, I was
well.
just going to say.
Yeah, let's do that.
So, one of the things that I felt like did very well is we would come together after the last day of school and we're all exhausted. I mean, all of us are just tired. At Anastasis, we had to clear out every item in every single classroom and put it in a storage room because we leased space from a church. So we had to look like we never existed in those spaces. And it was exhausting, not only because we had just had the sprint towards the end of the year, we had just, the all of the emotions of the end of the year, but then we also have to now we have to shove all of our things, and like, you're not only closing down this year, but you're having to anticipate, like, am I going to remember where I put all of this for the beginning of the next year? But we took time as a staff, and usually food was involved, to sit around and debrief the year while it was fresh and capture it, usually just in a Google Doc, of like, what do we want to remember that sucked this year and we never want to do it again? And what worked so well that we want to capture it so that we never forget that this like worked so well, and we need to remember, like, always have a day off before this. And like, we would really go through and everything that we wanted to carry forward, and the things that we didn't.
I think that we would, if that was done in isolation, it would not have been
Mm-hmm.
helpful
Yep.
because it was also I think you had said before, we bookended the school year. So the way that we started the school year had to be planned in a way such that we knew that we were going to follow up multiple times throughout the year and also at the end of the year. So it wasn't like an expectation of, oh, hey, I know you just gave finals and you've just seen all
Yeah.
these kids out the door and had a field day. Hey, now think about some really heavy stuff. It was something that we knew was coming and had been
We
planned
also
all
had
along.
had a cadence of
Yes.
after events or after things throughout the year. Like you're saying, we would capture those at staff meetings. But the end of the year was really, it was usually geared towards the last block of the year and what had just happened. But inevitably, things came up like, we need to remember that around snow days, this worked really well, or this didn't work at all. Or we need to remember this triggered something and we should try this and write it down now so we don't forget in August when we've just had a break to try it, which I felt like was really nice. And then to go back to those documents again and again of like, oh yeah, I think we said something about this. What did we say that we wanted to do, so that it was at least named somewhere.
Also think that it was important that we continued our sense of community as a staff. That I wouldn't say that we were always all best friends, but I mean, for a lot of us, We really are.
We were best friends.
Right. And
Yep.
we didn't just hang out at school. Now, this is where it gets a little tricky because I know for a lot of people they like to keep their work life separate, and that's what they need to do to survive, and I'm okay with that. For us, it was really important for us to see each other outside of school, to enjoy being together. So, and that looked different for each of us individually and as a group. But we were intentional about, hey, let's get together during the summer. I know that we went paddleboarding, a bunch of us, not everybody who could, but a lot of us
Well, and some
did.
people would be on vacation or out of,
Yeah.
but whoever was available, we always invited, I think, everyone. And then
Mm-hmm.
whoever was available came.
Right.
But yeah, paddle boarding, we did quite a bit. Yoga in the park, we
Yep.
did a ton of.
Lunches, breakfasts. I mean, just
Yeah.
whenever we could get together. And
The
we also
French cafe. We did so many things at that French cafe. Also, no longer RIP for the French cafe.
COVID hit
Yeah.
a lot of our favorite places, didn't it?
It did. It
Yeah.
sure did.
But just going to shows together. I mean, sometimes we
Concerts,
have
yeah.
students who are in productions and we've been able to go see them. Just all of these different opportunities to socialize and show, just like we were talking about with students, it's not just about working together and that's all I care about. You see ya, bye. It's more about how can I cultivate this village, this community that I care enough about you to want to socialize with you, but also to help take care of you sometimes. And
But
sometimes
if
that's
you
been
think
great
about
too.
how that happened all the way throughout the year,
Yeah,
it wasn't
exactly.
just at the end of the year, we do this. A lot of throughout the year, we would do happy hours together.
Hmm.
Like all of us go and have a happy hour, and inevitably, like we talk about school and we talk about life and we talk about all the things. We also felt free to show up to school, to the workplace as whole people. And so we would talk about what was going on with a spouse or with a dog or with a child or what we did over the weekend. And like we started staff meetings as humans before we jumped into solving problems, just like we do with the kids. And so I think that made a huge difference. Our beginning of the year, like staff development, was always focused on, I mean, we talked about some of the things that we've done, but it was always focused on connection first and then secondarily these other pieces. And so I think it felt very natural to continue those relationships, over the summer breaks or beyond, even now we still get together and do things together. But I think it felt very natural because the bright line between work and home wasn't there anyway. Where in a lot of places I've been, it's like, well, you leave your home life at home and like you're
Yeah.
here to work, and you show up at school and you're ready to work, and that's the only person that, those people knew. Where at Anastasis, like we were talking about the shows we were watching and the like on and on and on, the music we were listening to or the vacation we were planning, like all of that happened
Yeah.
pretty organically in all the spaces.
I wonder, like, and I'd said it before that I have respect for people who want to keep work and home life separate. I wonder how much of that is necessary if you are allowed to be your whole self at work.
That's what I'm thinking. Like if I couldn't be in previous jobs, I couldn't
Same.
come
Yeah.
as my whole self.
Yeah.
And so it felt natural to like have a really bright line, and I don't know these people beyond our work relationship, and so no, I don't want to spend time with them outside of work, and I want that clear
Yeah.
line. But we couldn't show up as whole people, so like of course I wouldn't want that because I didn't know them.
Right. I used to work for a company, one of my few sojourns out of education, and I worked for two different. One of them was I'm here for work and nothing else, and I hung out with maybe a couple of people and had lunches with them, but we didn't really socialize much after. I think we played volleyball one year, but that was it. And then another company where we really were friends, and it was easier to go into work and feel like I could be comfortable and who I am and all of that. Because I think there are quite a few people who look at education as it's a professionalism that's different than maybe other industries. And sometimes because of that, I've worked in some schools where they were like, oh, we have to be professionals because we don't want to come off as those people who don't work summers or who do whatever they want and that they have a lot of flexibility. And I think there's been like an overcorrection of be a professional. I mean, there's that just even that phrase, be a professional, means different things to different people. And I think that makes those lines blurry at work. I know I'm not going to come in and trauma dump, but at the same time, I might need to let you know what I'm going through so you know how I'm entering the building today. And I trust and respect you enough to know I can do that, where I would not have been able to do that in other places.
We did have a level of trust that made that all possible the way that that went. But I also think that the kids picked up on how we interacted, that we were genuinely enjoyed each other, that we were doing things together outside of school. And I think that that changed how they interacted as well, because they were seeing it modeled.
Yeah.
I would think there's some schools that I've been in that I can't imagine the kids interacting that way because the adults wouldn't have interacted that way. Like there would have been it didn't feel like the place for it because the adults were so like rigid.
When you keep everybody at arm's length, it's very difficult to help partner with that person or help that person grow because you don't know enough and you haven't cultivated that respect, that relationship, whatever that might be, enough to trust each other to grow together. And I mean, I know, again, education is kind of unique in how we approach those things, but I think, again, from our experience, I grew more as a person in 14 years at Anastasis. And that growth did not look constantly, moving up. It was a lot of roller coaster and loop-de-loops all over the place because that's, who I am. I'm a human being.
It's truly the thing that I miss the most. I was telling my husband the other day that it's showing up to a group of people that you know that you have a shorthand with because they know you and they care about you. And that's the thing I think I miss the most about Anastasis and having that place to be. And I'm based on the texts and things that I get from parents, that's also what they miss the most is having that community. And it's interesting that the parents developed those kind of relationships as well across grade levels, across whatever. And they're some of the best friends still, years later outside of Anastasis, and they're still the best of friends. And it's been interesting watching from the periphery, like kids who maybe argued a lot, or we heard a lot of, I don't know, they weren't always the best of friends, right? They didn't always get along, or if we were going to have a conflict that we were mediating, it was these kids, that kind of thing. It's been really interesting this year that they're in different schools, they're in different places, and they're still choosing to have play dates together, to get together and do things together. And I'm like, isn't that something that, even people that I was friends with in school and years later, you fall out of touch with them. And the relationships were such at Anastasis that it's like you crave that knowingness, that just the shorthand that you have with people, the similar experiences that you've had, you see the world through a similar lens. And so you don't have to feel like you have to explain yourself, or I don't know, there's something like very trusting about that.
There's a reason that multiple cultures have sayings of I see you. It's in multiple cultures around the world. And it's I know you, I see you, I honor you, any kind of form of that. And the reason is because it's so important to us to feel known. Doesn't mean that I'm necessarily loved in the sense of we're family kind of love, like the brotherly love that we talk about. And when you look at that, I see you, I respect you, I honor you, there's something about that just has that level of acceptance. It is exhausting to be pretending to be someone you're not. But I think people forget that.
You're not constantly pretending.
Yeah. And when you can be yourself, and in a community of learners,
even
a community of exactly, even when we butt heads all the time, or we just don't always get along, but I still know you well enough that there's like this comfort level, and that makes the learning easier.
And there's a level of care.
Yeah.
Right? There's a level of care and compassion and consideration that even when I'm irritated with you, like I still care about you as a human. And that's different than when you don't know someone. It's easy to be like, well, I don't care about you and you can jump off a cliff.
Well, again, I think when there's a lot of othering to people you don't know. And it's really
Yeah.
easy to stop thinking about people as human beings when you other them. So that's one of the reasons that I know some of our teachers were really big on getting kids out, not only into different communities, but to travel. And anytime they could make that happen financially, they were like, it is so important for you to go to other places and meet people who don't look like you or live like you, because you're still seeing, here are these things that we have in common, even though we are very different. And when you can see that, when you see those people, it doesn't mean that you're going to live like that or look like that or whatever it might be. You still have this newfound respect for, hey, these folks live like this, and now I've experienced this. It's an important, not everybody's going to have that opportunity. So one of the things that we tried to at Anastasis was to give kids opportunities to see that in any way that we could, even if it was just video, right? But when we talk about really honoring the human experience, it is seeing other people so that we know, hey, we're all on this planet together. We might be thousands and thousands of miles apart, but we're all on this planet, so we're all in it together. And that is important when you stop to think about, your community might be really small to start off with, but when you really take there's a really good video about getting the world's view, and the camera keeps pulling back from like a city all the way back into planets.
It was a website, wasn't it? That I can't remember what it was called.
I can't either.
If
You
I
could
can
do
find
it.
it, I'll put it in the show notes.
Do it with Google Earth. You can do it with there was one that was just showing the relative size of planets and stars. There are lots of ways to go about that, and we often did that in some of our inquiry units about sharing the planet.
Well, and with the junior high, if folks have never seen it, the movie Baraka, there's no words in the entire film. It is literally just images from all over the world, and pretty fast paced. And Baraka means blessing. And not all the images look like blessing. Like it'll go from, a city where you're watching people like move around the city kind of sped up. And then it'll go to a chicken processing plant. And you're like, it's jarring. And then it'll go to like an indigenous tribal ceremony. And then it'll go to something else. And it's just showing you like, we're all connected. Every piece of this is connected. Every piece of this, like, we bump up against each other, and there's patterns everywhere. Like it's a really cool video, but we would watch that with the kids, with the junior high kids, and their reflections after watching Baraka were always pretty amazing. But to that same point of like, how do we help kids see, even if we can't take them all the places? And there's ways, right? Film is a beautiful way to do that. Books are a great way to do that. But you have to be intentional too about choosing to have books in your classroom libraries of people that don't look like you and are having different experiences.
Right.
Like, and
mirrors,
it's sad to me
doors, windows.
It's sad to me seeing us in a moment in the United States where some of that is being taken out of schools, because school is the place where we can really show that we are all connected, and that even if I don't choose to believe the things you believe, if I know who you are and I can see things through your eyes, I can at least be compassionate, right? And I think that's what we're losing by removing that and making it more homogeneous, is we lose that capacity for compassion.
Well, just the fact that some people don't read fiction past school, and fiction is like one of the number one things you can do to learn and grow in empathy. Again, I can't not have a book going, even if I have there are seasons of my life where it's harder to get through books and it takes me longer, or sometimes it takes me 2 days and I'm done, or a day. That's something that I will always cherish in my life, is reading. Yes, I read a lot of nonfiction, but I definitely read more fiction, because I love being able to escape into other people and read and put myself in someone else's place to experience a story. And to hear that some folks never read fiction past high school or college is I even though I have a music degree and that's what I taught for the majority of my education career, I cannot imagine not wanting people to be readers and
No.
just experience the joy of a book. So,
Yeah. Well,
that's
and again,
again,
like film is a great way, documentaries are a great way. I can't tell you like how many documentaries that my husband and I watch, and my whole understanding of the world shifts just a little bit,
right,
right?
right,
Where you're like, now, I can see something that I couldn't see before.
right.
Father Greg Boyle has this great line in Cherished Belonging, and he says that some things can only be seen through eyes who have cried the same tears. And he's talking about being at a gang member's funeral and that other gang members were at this cemetery grieving over a lost parent or something. And it was like, yeah, you can't, it's hard to explain and understand if you haven't had the same, cried those same tears or had that same experience or seen something through somebody else's lens that's different than yours.
Yeah. It's funny because as you're saying that, I'm thinking through all of these different books that I've been reading, and I tend to like horror books most, but
Yuck.
well, it has to have
Not my genre.
at the heart of it, it has to have humanity for me. If it's
Sure.
just gore or terror or things like that, that's not my thing. So it's always interesting how authors are able to weave and craft these incredible stories that can be very scary and full of terror, but it always comes back down to a human need, right? That is the piece for me that I really, really love. And any story, and this is, I would get so excited with kids about books because they would come up and say, oh, I really love the story about, and then we would start comparing the journey of the characters in
Mm-hmm.
the books, even if they were completely separate, like completely different books. And the kids be like, oh, well, yeah, they have common themes. And that was just a great way to experience something together. But we had shared experience in reading those books. And it can be true of film. I mean, like, that's when you look at pop culture and how people experience things. I think we at one point were talking about how streaming has changed that shared.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody used to sit down and watch TV at a certain
Yep.
time of night on a certain day, and it was a shared
And you had to
experience.
catch it or you had to
Right,
wait for the
exactly.
rerun.
And now there's still things that
There's something
trend.
lost.
But yeah,
Yeah.
I think that because there's an abundance, an overabundance, it's like going to the grocery store and trying to pick out cereal. In the United States, there are
Well,
so many
in the
cereal
United States.
choices
Yeah, I
that,
was going to say that's
yes,
not true
it's
everywhere, but in the United States.
overwhelming. If you
Yeah.
don't, that's why I tend to stick with the same thing, right? I always go get the Cheerios, but it's overwhelming. And that's what I look at with all of the streaming options. And you and I might be watching something at the same time because we talk about it, but other people are like, I've never heard of that
Well,
show. What
how
are you talking about?
frustrated do you get when you're like, hey, did you watch it yet? Did you watch it yet? And I'm like 3 weeks behind because my husband refuses to binge a show.
And I'm like, no spoilers. Come on, Kelly,
No
hurry up.
spoilers, hurry up. Yeah, there is something lost there. And I wonder about how that's going to impact kids too.
Yeah.
If we'll swing back, like if the pendulum will swing back because it's something we miss. I also wonder how AI is going to change that, being that if you can get AI to make you anything you want and you can watch the movie you want to watch at any time and you can star in it and you can like all of these, I'm like, again, that mirror shining back at us, like we're never meant to just gaze at
Mm-hmm.
ourselves that much. Like we're meant
I,
to be in community.
no.
And I'm like,
Yeah.
gosh, that's going to be like, we could get further siloed. We're pretty fragmented now, but we could get even further fragmented and siloed without those like cultural touch points of shared experience and shared whatever, which to me makes what happens in school and building community in school like all the more important to focus on this as a skill of how do you build healthy community before we're facing that reality, right?
I
Because you
am,
want people to know that they are still connected and that and to still be
yes.
compassionate, to still see each other. But like we said at the beginning, that's a skill you have to cultivate and that's a skill that you have to explicitly like work on. It doesn't happen happenstance by happenstance.
I'm going to maintain that AI is going to crash and burn. It's not sustainable. It's not ethical the way that it's being used. There are too many things wrong with it, and I'm not willing to sacrifice all that is lost to wait for it to get better. It's not going to get better. So there are places where it is appropriate. We've already talked about that. I don't need to rehash that over and over and over again. But I will say it is taking away humanity in a way that it's not good for any of us. So I'm going to keep pushing back and saying it's going to crash and burn. It's definitely not good for kids in the way that it's being used. The fact that people keep substituting a search engine with Chat GPT, that's not what it does. So stop using it as such. So I'll stop going
Well,
off of my little.
the unfortunate part of that, though, I don't know. Well, we've talked about this, but now so many of the search engines come up with the AI response first, and then I'm like so glad that wasn't a thing when we were still
Mm-hmm,
doing inquiry, because it was already enough to say like Google is not a source
mm-hmm.
to kids. But can you imagine now it's like actually is a source, but it's still not. It's just,
And it's
yeah.
still wrong.
Yeah. It would
Yeah.
be a little bit rough navigating that the way that we worked through school and
I just keep
learning and
turning all of
inquiry.
those features off, or I use search engines that don't have that component at all, or I know what to type into the search bar to maintain an AI free experience. So I do think, again, when you are isolating yourself and you need something artificial to substitute for other humans, we've gone off the charts of what we're intended to do. Um, and that is to be there for each other. So when you look at how kids are learning, when you look at how families come into a school, that community piece is vital, and you cannot substitute that with anything else. So as we had said before, we bookend our school year, and we are intentional all the way through the school year to build that community and to ensure that people know we are there for you, we see you, we honor who you are. And that's why I feel like we were successful in doing that
I
and
would
doing
agree.
anything that we did.
And as just a poetic moment, literally as we're having this conversation, I got a text from a former Anastasis parent saying, "Have you read this book?" I mean, how perfect.
What a
If
fun
that doesn't
synchronicity
sum it
that
all
is.
up, that is a fun synchronicity. And that's not unusual, the number of times that families reach out and say like, have you listened to this podcast, or have you heard this, or have you watched this, or you would enjoy this? And we know that about each other because we took the time of doing that and creating that community. And everybody has a community, but are we, here's the word again, being really intentional to be in a healthy community well and explicitly creating the conditions where that is true.
Right. Are you in a community that helps to build you up and help you not just survive, but to thrive? That you are getting sustained through that community? Or are you in a community that you're constantly competing and fighting and scrambling to the top, or trying to anyway, and that it leaves you depleted and empty?
The through line of everything that we have talked about since we started this podcast that I knew, but I don't know if I would have named it from the get-go, is that we were a school so focused and honed in on humanity and all that comes with humanity. I think I would have named it like we were learner first, right? We were learner centered, learner first. But we understand the sacredness of the individual, but we also understand the sacredness of the individual in a healthy
Right.
community.
I know that we often talked
They're
about
not
that
separate.
it had to be, we're teaching the whole child, but it wasn't just the whole child. It was also, we're here to support you as a family. We're here to support you as staff. And we didn't take that word community lightly. It was the priority for everything else that came with a school.
Well, and it really was, what does love look like expressed as a school? And I think when I see other schools talk about being learner centered, and I look at them and I'm like, oh, that's not what we were talking, that's not what we were doing. What is it that we were really doing? So it was true that we were learner centered, but I think in the like most authentic version of what that means, in my mind at least. But I think it gets hard to put language around it when everybody's saying the same words, and it doesn't look different from place to place. So I am glad, we started this with the intent of like, even if nobody listens, let's at least capture our stories and the way things happen. And I'm so glad that we're doing it, because it really does remind me of just how many micro moves that we made that led to the school that we had.
Right. 100% agree.
Yeah. Well, that was fun. Should we put a period on it for today?
I think so. I think that was a good stopping place.
Okay. Onward.
Onward.
Hey, Michelle, where else can people find you online?
I blog at avenue4learning.com, and the 4 is the actual number 4, not the word 4. avenue4learning.com. And
you can find me at dreamsofeducation.wordpress.com, which is my original blog. You can also find me at ktsplace.com, which is where I share a bunch of resources and kind of projects that we're currently working on. And we are both on Blue Sky at the moment, but not as active as we once were on our favorite bird. Come find us and connect with us in other places, and we look forward to connecting with you. Education.